We're going to cover a lot of material today, so take notes. You know, anything you want to ask me in the end, I'm not leaving till all the questions are answered, for one, on it. Just a little bit about myself. I had a used bookstore, and I still own the store myself, but me and my dad started a store in '92. And throughout a couple of years in running the store there, things just weren't right with him. And it got to the point where he couldn't do math. And this man never needed a calculator for anything. And literally, you get to the point where people would come in, he'd give him a $20 bill, buying something, he'd put the 20 in the till, take it right back out and hand it back to the person. And I'm like, geez, that was not even that bad at the point. He goes, sir, you just gave me back all my money. My dad was like, shut up, you idiot. I was like, oh my God, we're going to be out of business tomorrow. Right? It was the frustration that was overwhelming him and building and building and building on it, So that was the start of the thing. My biggest problem that I went through at the beginning is that his doctor was almost his best friend. And I went through a 2-year period where I could bring him, I'm telling the doctor, I'm like, listen, I'm telling you, we have a problem here. And my dad could hold himself together. That 15-minute visit, absolutely, like nothing was wrong. I'd get him in the car, I couldn't even convince him that we were just at the doctor's office doing it. So this doctor even got to a point where he put his finger in my face one day and he goes, I'm going to tell you something, you are over-exaggerating this. I'm like, oh my goodness. This doctor retired. That's how I got out of this. The guy that took over his practice, the very first appointment, he goes, man, you got a problem here. I'm like, where have you been for 2 years? Right? We have to get these people correctly diagnosed from the beginning. It's crucial because there's so many other different types of dementia out there. I mean, we go through the list from Lewy bodies, FTD. It's not easy to be diagnosed with dementia, but we got to work on that. We got to stick with the doctor and push them if we have to on it. So we got to make sure they're correctly diagnosed. Different symptoms, different medications. There's a big difference between the dementias. It's important to know that. I started writing a column. It was actually 6 years ago this Sunday, just at the anniversary of the thing on it. And I've been writing about dementia. I've written 3 books on dementia and Alzheimer's caregiving and everything on it. So I got a lot of information to share with you. That's where we're going to start. What do you think is the biggest mistake a caregiver makes? Okay.
They start getting angry and thinking that the person is just trying to be combative with them.
Okay. Anybody else?
Not getting help.
You already knew the answer. That's all right. In my opinion, the biggest mistake you're making is not getting, because if you get help and you don't let things build up, you can fix these little things we're talking about. Getting angry at the patient, being in denial, all that stuff. But I'm going to tell you something. We have to start looking for help today. You can't wait to the end of this. I'm telling you this because I made all these mistakes. All right, I started this 17 years ago with my dad. He's been gone now 5 years. But I mean, the things that I made, I'm like, there was nothing for me back then 17 years ago. You guys got a lot going for yourself right now. You really do. There's a big difference between now and then on it. So where do you go for help? Support groups. We'll get into that a little bit later and everything else, but there's a lot of places where you can find help on it. And I just want you to know that. When I started taking care of my dad, it was my father, my family, my responsibilities. Right? I was wrong. Because I'm going to tell you what happens. At the end of this campaign, you don't even have time to breathe as a caregiver. If you don't look for help now, don't think you're going to be able to find it in the end, because you're going to be pulling your hair out of your head. We've got to be proactive. So it's very important that we do this on it. It becomes a 2-person job, and that's the reality towards the end of this. I'm not going to sugarcoat this today, so just to let you know, we're going to talk about it honestly as we go through this on it. The number one thing you can do for anybody with dementia is going to be keeping them in a routine. Run-of-the-mill lifestyle, I'm talking breakfast at the same time, lunch at the same time. Keep everything in patterns. When you have no more short-term memory, you're going to find that routine is going to become their best friend on this. All right? We want to keep everything in little, it may sound simple, but these little pattern stuffs are going to help immensely. I used to use a little blue bowl for my dad's pills. Every morning and every evening. If I tried to hand him his pills or put them on a different plate, I had a major problem. To the point where he was accusing me of poisoning him. So put everything in the same. I would set the dinner table up with a knife, fork, spoon, everything the same pattern all the time. If he was have a bowl of soup, I still had the steak knife laying there. So when he sat down, it was a pattern. All right? It might get boring for the caregiver, but what's good for the patient is going to be good for the caregiver. So the people living with dementia, routine is very good for them. We have to think about this on it. There's no right or wrong manual on this. I mean, nobody's actually getting to the point where they've written a perfect manual because every patient is different. There's a saying, if you meet one Alzheimer's patient, you've met one. And by the meaning of that is everybody has different symptoms. as we go through this on it. So we got to just keep things in patterns as we go through this on it. If nobody's telling you you're doing a good job, pat yourself on the back, yell it out the window. Who cares? I mean, they're doing it, but we have to learn to adapt as they adapt. The disease is going to win. They have to adapt. We got to kind of learn that too as ourselves as we go through this on it. The second most important thing we need to do is we really got to work on their anxiety levels. All right, routine is going to help this by keeping things in a pattern. You know, we talked about routine. I made a mistake one day. I took my dad for two doctor's appointments in one day. Bad mistake. I figured I'm going to get it all done in one shot. That was a nightmare. It wasn't even that day. I'm talking this lasted for days. Afterwards, he was still a mess. You know, instead of breaking him from the routine on it. So we got to think of the anxiety and all this stuff, the confusion, keeping him in a routine is going to help. I like to analyze it like this. Say we go into a mall. We're shopping there, we're in there for 2 hours. I'm not my type of thing. I don't personally like it, but say we're doing this. You walk out and the parking lot's completely packed. You can't find your vehicle. This wave of panic comes washing over us. Happens to all of us. Right? But when we find the vehicle, everything subsides. For the person living with dementia, that stays with them. It's an all day, all night thing on it. That confusion, that panic thing on it. So I'm not saying they're going to have bad points at the beginning, but eventually they're going to progress to the point where that confusion is going to stay with them all the time on it. So if you think about that and you had to live in that point of view all day long, it's pretty tough as we go through all this on it. So we want to work on the routines, the anxiety and all that, keep everything low. But we've got to consider the depression that's involved. All right, there's nobody that's been diagnosed with a dementia-related disease does not go through how could you not go through depression when you get diagnosed with something like this? The depression itself will cause dementia. So now you get the depression coming out of the dementia, you get the depression coming out of the disease, you stack in the two on top of each other and you wonder why they're a mess. All right, we can't really control the dementia as much on the disease, but we can control the dementia. If you see them, they're somber, they're crying and everything, we need to address this with their doctor. And I'm not saying like when they have an appointment in 3 months, we'll address it then. You need to get on the phone, call the doctor now, and have them addressing it. Listen, there's something wrong, the person's somber, I can see some depression building. We need to take care of that right away. Very important. It wouldn't be fair to anybody to leave anybody like that. All right, so this is something we have to address. And I hear it all the time. Well, he's got an appointment coming up in 6 months. I'm like, you're going to leave this person like this for 6 months? We need to take care of it now. And by doing this, we can control a lot. We can help that person live with this a lot better on it. There's medications out there. When I started taking care of my dad, I was a person, I don't believe in medicating him. He's over-medicated. I'm not going to let that happen to him. I was wrong. There is times and places for behavior medications that's going to help control the situation. If we can keep their anxiety down, we're going to help them. These are two things we've really got to concentrate on. All right, keeping them in a routine and keeping their anxiety and depression, put that all together as we go through it. We'll call it one thing as we go through all this on it. Now, as a caregiver tool, all right, most of you might probably already know this, but we got to learn to use redirection. All right, sometimes a little quick sentence might help these people. When you see they're starting to snowball, you can see when the confusion's building, everything's happening. They might be fumbling in their hands. They could be pacing. I could say, "I love that green on you. That's a fantastic color. That looks good on you." That might control them and bring them down. You, yes. Looks good on you, looks good on them. So anyway, so we're working on that with little words, little things like that. The truth of the matter is, these sentences that redirect, they're going to stop working. Eventually the disease is going to win, and that's not going to help on it. We can always try to use it, but I want you to work on their senses. Taste, touch, and smell can redirect them faster than anything. All right? I would give my dad a green washcloth and a blue one. I go, which one of these two do you like better? He's got them on the table, he's folding them, unfolding them. I never got an answer about the color, but that's okay. All right? He had something in his hands. There's a saying, idle hands are the devil's toys. Remember that. Sometimes they're just putting something in their hands, doing it. Redirectional tool, I had 2 photo albums on my kitchen table at all times. When my dad was done eating, I'd pull the plates, I'd put the photo album right in front of him. He's flipping through the pages, he's telling him about this picture, different guy than last night, same picture, that's okay, but it kept him calm, man. It's like, tell me the whole story about this guy that was Uncle Bob yesterday, but now it's Uncle Who. It doesn't matter. But it's something we want to use as redirection on it. We got to, how are we going to turn them around? When you see that anxiety building, redirection can work on this. All right, there's something out there also called gum therapy. All right. And what they did is, I told you, I took my dad to the doctor twice in one day, 2 appointments. On the way home from the second appointment, he's opening the door as I'm driving. You don't know where you're going the wrong way. I'm like, oh my goodness. He's got his seatbelt on. Like, you got to stop opening the door, you know? I'm like a mile from the house. He's flipping out. I reach in my pocket, I grab a thing of peppermint candy. I put one in my mouth, I unwrap one, I put one in his mouth. You know what happened? All he tasted was the peppermint. That's redirection by taste. I'm going to give you a hint. Ice cream, best redirectional tool in the world. All right? I ain't kidding about it. My dad's got a nice bowl of ice cream. I get 20 minutes apiece. I'm like, are you sure you don't want another one? Because I'll bring you the whole half gallon right now, man. I think it's a little bit of piece on this thing on it. So that's redirection by taste. Smell. They talk about aromas to bring back different memories. That's redirection by smell. Use their senses. Even in the latter stages of the disease, their senses are going to work. All right, so that's something you got to remember and think about as you go further on. We got to keep them out of that, that confusion, that anxiety, and these are ways to do that as we work through this on it. Now, there's going to be a day, and this is going to hurt you. I'm telling you right now. They're going to look at you. Your loved one's going to look at you, and they're not going to know who you are. All right, and it's just got to remember it's not their fault, but I'm telling you, I was with my dad 24/7. We were working together. I was with him all the time. So he didn't know who my sister was anymore. He didn't know any of his friends. My mother, his ex-wife, would come in there. He would think it was mom or whatever. It didn't matter dealing. He didn't know who she was dealing it. And one day, he looked at me sitting at the kitchen table, and he goes, "Sir," he goes, who are you? I'll tell you, it was like somebody put a knife right through me. I can feel it today. I'm in doing it. But here's the thing. It's not their fault. The synapses in the brain just aren't firing like they used to. Sometimes they get a lot of decay in the brain. These thought patterns have to take these detours to get to where they're going. I could walk out this door, be gone for 5 minutes, and come back, and my dad would go, "Gary, where have you been? I've been waiting for you all day." So you're still in there. Always remember that you're inside them. They just can't pull up the memory at that time. The last 2 years of my dad's life, I became dad. He looked at me and he thought I was his father. And it was a little disturbing at first. Then I'm like, wow, wait a minute here, He's like, "Dad, do I got to take these pills?" I'm like, "If you don't take those pills, I'm telling your mother." He's like, "No!" Right? I was like, "Hey, this is working, man." He listened to me. I wish I got the respect I never when I was a kid compared to what I got back in those last couple of years. But it works. So if you become Bob, become Bob. First of all, you're never going to win the argument anyway. You don't even want to go there. So just play the role. It's like you're going with the Academy Award. Just play it out, man, and doing it. And when you become yourself again, that's fine. Just cherish those moments as you go through this on it. My dad was the oldest of 17 kids. It's a large Canadian family, all right? He would always ask for his brother Alfie, who was the second oldest. They grew up together. They went to university together. Alfie went into World War II. He got shot up. He made it home, but he died about 30 days after he got home. All right? So this man had been gone, decades at this point. And one day I said to him, I said, "Dad, Alfie's been gone for almost 50 years. He looked at me and he goes, "What kind of family are you? You didn't even tell me about my brother's funeral?" I was like, "Oh, that was a mistake." All right? So bottom line, I learned to lie. You got to be careful when you tell these fibs to these people because you get certain things the other way. But I say, I just talked to Alfie on the phone. He said he's going to be gone for the night. He'll be back in the morning. Okay. Sometimes in the morning, he's like, "Where's Alfie?" Right? Sometimes it doesn't always work. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying to lie to them all the time. There's therapeutical fibs, lies like this. You got to think about it. If you tell the person with dementia, they're getting upset waiting for their daughter to come home from school when their daughter is actually married with 2 kids living in another state. She goes, "Well, she's going to be home this afternoon." Sometimes they're sitting there in the window waiting. So you got to play it out everything's got to be a little by play and by decision on it. But most of the times it's going to work. You want to keep them calm, and that's your job. If the lie is going to be causing a safety hazard, or if it's going to keep them from being a safety hazard, I'd say use it. But you got to learn to fib a little bit on this. I'm just being straight out on it. Sometimes we got to be careful on that. But there's things we got to do on it. The same thing at night. He goes, "I got to get home. It's getting dark out. My mother's going to be worried. She's been dead 20 years at this point, I'm like, "Oh, I just talked to her. She knows you're going to spend the night here. Why don't you play cards till dinner's ready?" He's like, "Oh, she knows?" "Yeah, she knows." So this is what you do. I was doing an event like this, and I had a woman literally get up and walk out. Actually, I just did another one. The guy was upset with me on this. He was upset. He goes, "What happens if they don't want to take their medications?" I'm like, "Oh, you can tell them it's vitamins or something like that." She goes, so you're saying to lie to him. He goes, I think we ought to go to the judge and have the judge. I go, you want to go in front of a court? But the guy was grieving. He was in a point where I could see that he was really hurting at this time. He was looking for any answer he could find. But trust me, you do not want to go in front of a court. The judge is going to say, well, if you can't handle this person at home, maybe we'll appoint a legal guardian. We'll get into that a little bit later as we go through this on it. So let's talk a little bit about wandering. The one thing I hear, and I hear this too much, and I start talking about this in an event like this, the guy goes, I don't have to worry about wandering because I'm with my wife 24/7. She's always with me and she's never wandered before. I'm telling you right now, you cannot think like that. All right? 6 out of 10 people with dementia are going to wander. All right? The bad statistic is, if they're not found in 24 hours, 48% become a fatality. All right? That's big numbers. And here's the other thing you got to pay attention to. Wanderers are repeat offenders. They wander once, I guarantee you it's going to happen again. So you got to start getting to that pattern to keep an eye on them all the time. We got to be more of a detective. We can put locks on the door and alarms and all that stuff, but we really need to investigate to find out what's causing them to wander. It's usually something environmental that's going to deal on it. That's something in the area. Background noise, right? Huge. We all know of somebody that owns a dog that every time the doorbell goes off on the television, that dog's running to the front door yapping. You can't think that your loved one's not going to do the same thing. I got law and order in my house. Police sirens going on. My dad's like, cops are here, right? It's the TV going on over there, man, you know? So these are the things that could get them to go. There's something called exploring, right? They look outside, there's this park bench. That park bench has been there for 15 years. But all of a sudden they're like, where did that bench come from? Now they're out the door, they're looking at this bench, and then they're off. It's that one step over the threshold where bad things can happen. So there's all these little things we got to pay attention to on it. It's called following, all right? You could be in a lockdown facility. They could be living in an ASF, something like that. And the CNA goes, he hits the code, walks out the door, and there's Mr. Jones. He's just following her. He doesn't know why and doing it. If she doesn't turn around and catch it, Mr. Jones is out the door. So these are all little things we got to pay a little more attention to. That background noise, if you hear somebody knocking on the door on the television, take that 2 seconds to look over and make sure they're still sitting where they're sitting. Because they go open the door and there's no one there, what happens? They step out. As we go through this. Here's what happens when you go and you wander. You wander, you're outside, and then you get lost. What happens when we get lost? We get scared. What happens when we get scared? We hide. So I'm doing a lot of training with the first responder. We're telling them, listen, you've got to look everywhere. You don't just drive around in your car. You got to physically get out and look. And you say, hey, Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones is not coming. He's going. He doesn't know who this person is. We're telling these people, the police officers or paramedics and everything, I know you worked very hard for this uniform, but this uniform could mean nothing to these people at this point. You know their anxiety is up to the roof. They're lost. They're scared. They're hiding. All right? So you know their confusion's up there. So we did some training in the hospital. We brought in the first responders, Hernando County Sheriff's Department. They brought in, one day of the training, they brought in all these correctional officers from the Hernando County Jail. You should have heard the stories these guys had. That jail was full of people with dementia resisting arrest. They don't look like they have dementia. They don't even recognize a police car when they're at that state, So they see that car coming up, they're just going there. So this is stuff we got to work on. There's certain things you can do to help. The door like this in my dad's bedroom, I took the door right off the hinges. Every time he heard noises in the other room, it would cause anxiety. You could tell he was always seeing what was going on. I took the door right off. I would take a chair like that. I'd stick it right in the door frame. It wasn't locking him in the room. That was just enough to keep him in direction. So when he was getting out of his bed, going to the bathroom, he'd poke his head like this over the chair and just go to the bathroom and then get back to bed. If it wasn't that chair, you don't know where he's going to go. And I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody. Every little thing can work and try on it. But that worked well for him, stuff like that. I had people tell me, oh, we hide their shoes at night. I'm like, come on. You got people up north, it's a snowstorm. These people are out there barefoot. So, that's a little bit more realistic. But the alarms are good. If you're going to put the deadbolt on the door, you want them out of their eyesight vision. Either if you're tall enough, put it at the top. If you're low enough, put it at the bottom. I was drilling a hole in the door, putting the deadbolt at the top. My dad came around. I didn't think he knew what I was doing. He goes, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm putting a lock up this so nobody can get in. He goes, oh, I like that. It was for him to know he wouldn't go out of the deal. I got news for you. Hide a key outside. The first 2 weeks, man, I got locked out of that house. I'm like, no, I'm not going to. It's like, who is it? I'm like, you know who it is. Open the damn door, man. I'm like, yeah, get a spare key and put it out there before you can go on it. So, Yeah, without a doubt. So we got the background noise. We talked about all that stuff. We go through it. It could be comfort. I mean, it could be something that they're just not comfortable. They got too many blankets or not enough blankets on their bed and they're walking on it. We got to pay attention to this. If you live in a neighborhood that you believe that you get some safe neighbors that you can trust, let them know that the person has dementia. And if you see him walking, could you please bring him back to the house or at least call me? But if you don't, we got to be very careful on who we tell that person has dementia, because there's evil people everywhere. I don't care what part of town you're living in. There's some people you just can't trust. So we got to be choosing on who we're telling this to. You know, these people become victims pretty easily on this stuff on it. So they'll let them walk like this and then go in the house and rob them blind because they know they're gone. So there are still some good Samaritans out there. Another thing we have to do, and we have to do this as caregivers, because Medicaid and Medicare does not cover this. But we need to become speech therapists. All right? We need to keep these people talking. When they get down to 1-2 word sentences, I'm telling you, it's all downhill from there. I've seen people disappear very quickly at that point on it. So we need to keep them in that conversation. That photo album, have them tell you the story in that picture. Keep that conversation going no matter what. All right? We have to learn their body languages now, today. Right? And you're the person, the caregivers are the person to do this. Nobody else is going to really be able to do on it. But you got to realize what's going on with these people. If they're going to the doctor, they can't tell what's wrong. It's going to be our job to do this. So we have to learn. We got to learn from them a little bit as much as we can. The problem is we have to understand that communication and behaviors, they're linked together like this. And as humans, we don't think about this. We just kind of blow this off. We got a woman in an assisted living facility. She's crying for 3 days. Right? Nobody knows why she's crying. She's not telling anybody. All of a sudden, they give her a little bit of pain medication. She stops crying. That crying was communication. All right? And we have a tendency just saying, somebody gets combative and get bad behavior, like, oh, that person's just being a jerk. Maybe if I can't tell you there's something wrong, I'm going to find a way to tell you. All right? So we got to think about that. Behavior and communication, they are together when they link like this on it. So this is stuff we got to realize on it. I mean, people are disrobing in public, right? Very common with people with dementia on it. If I'm hot and I can't tell you, I'm going to find a way, right? Either I'm going to be doing this or I'm getting nude, man. It's going to be one or the other, man. That's communication. We don't look at it that way, but it's true as we go through this on it. So we need to keep them talking. If you're playing a game with them, a card game or something, make sure that conversation's flowing. Lawrence Welk, come on Saturday night at 7 o'clock. My dad starts singing the words like he wrote them himself. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. I'm going to get a CD on this stuff. You know, at least it was a one-sided conversation. It's better than nothing. You can't let them just sit there and not have that conversation, you know, and spend their days like that, because the dementia is going to come twice as fast on them. We want to keep that part of it going on it. So, do you know what shadowing is? Shadowing is when they start following you around like a little child holding on to the dress, mother's dress and all that stuff on it. And it doesn't sound very concerning to maybe to some people, and I'm going to tell you something that's very unnerving, all right, as you go through this on it. First of all, let's back up 1 minute. Do we know what sundowners is? Everybody pretty much know? All right. Sundowners, 4:45 in my house, everybody got a new name. All right, it was just that time of day. But here's the thing. I got to know when it was coming. All right? You got to be proactive on this. That's when I'd go get the photo album and I'd take it off the kitchen table and I'd go stick it in his lap an hour before the sundowners. Not before it happened. I mean, you got to keep them active. That's the thing about that time of day. The scientists, they want to say it's because of the shifting of light and day. I honestly think of who, what, when, and where all day long. Anybody's going to be exhausted. By the end of the day, they're going to be more tired. It's going to be, you know, going. I could see my dad sometimes he's sundowning in the morning. Rainy days, sometimes it felt like he was sundowning all day long. So it's not always in the evening. But we want to keep, we talked about their hands full and all that, busy. Same type of thing with the sundowning. But right before the sundowning is when the shadowing would start with my dad. And I'm telling you, he would follow me. I didn't even have to turn around. I could feel him breathing on the back of my neck. If I took a step back, I was stepping on his feet. Right? I'll tell you, it's like, it gets to you. It really is pretty unnerving doing it. I'm walking into the bathroom. I wasn't in the bathroom 10 seconds. He's banging on the door. What are you doing in there? And the truth of the matter, half the time I was just standing there trying to get 30 seconds of peace. I wasn't even peeing, you know. Just want a little bit of quiet for a minute. It was bang, bang. I'm like, oh. So I don't want to use the word wean, but we need to be proactive and start them getting used to socializing with other people early. I waited too long. I made a mistake. We had a friend in the family try to come over, stay with them so I could go to the pharmacy, go get the groceries and stuff like that. I couldn't even get out of the property on doing this stuff. He knew who that woman was. He'd be like, what do you want, babysitter? He was mean as hell with her. I wasn't gone 20 minutes. He already asked her 100 times where I was. She couldn't take it anymore. Like I said, I waited too long. If there's adult daycares, I know there was a woman here that runs adult daycare here, Luann, doing it, there, right there. Get them into that early. Let them get used to it. If they don't want to go, tell them, hey, you need to go and help out those other people. Volunteer. Become a volunteer and go over there. Do something with your time. You know, maybe might turn it around a little bit. But that is good. I'm going to tell you, we're going to talk about dementia mentors in a bit. It is so important to keep these people social. I know people that have been, the guy that built the website has had Alzheimer's now for 10 years, and he just built the website for dementia mentors. As I'm going to talk about this on it. He stayed social. I got a friend of mine in England. This guy doesn't stop. He's got Lewy body dementia now for 5 years, going on 6 years, right? Social. He stops and everything. David right here. Social. He goes out there. This is, we didn't know this years ago because of all the stigmas we're trying to beat up on this disease. Very important. If it's early on, don't let them stop being socializing. Keep them out in the public. Let the public deal with it and learn about it. I mean, we have to. There's some things we got to change in this disease. We're working on it. We're fighting it, but we got to change the stigmas on this. All right. The mornings, very crucial part of the day. All right. If you have a bad morning, usually sometimes the whole day goes that way, right? I can imagine if they have a bad morning. All right. Usually that's the whole start of the whole day at that point. Then my dad's taking 30 minutes to put a shoe on. That shoe goes flying across the room. Okay, time to adapt. Velcro straps, loafers, whatever, man, doing it. My dad wore business suits all his life. Right? He ended up in sweatpants and flannel shirts, and he liked it. Somebody would have told me this 10 years ago, so I'm like, you're out of your mind. I'd buy him a flannel shirt for Christmas. It never came out of the package. You know, that's how I was doing it. But he got easy on, easy off when we get to clothing. I got a chapter in my book called The Closet of Simplicity. I don't want them to open up their closet in the morning and see 30 dresses, 30 pants, and everything. Limit choices. We need to limit choices for everything, not just clothing. Doing it. So it's something we want to do. And I'd set him up. I had a week's worth in there. You know, if he wanted to go in there and pick out his own clothes, he only had 5 choices. We can live with that. You know, doing it. So on it. Well, he went through a stage where he only wanted to wear red shirts for about a year and a half. I went out and I bought 5 red shirts, man. I didn't have to do laundry every day that way. It was like, you know, as we go through on it. But we got to think about this. We talk about tightness and clothing, easy on, easy off. My dad would not wear socks the last 2 years of his life. Refused. I'd get it cold in November. I'd put him on his feet. He had bad circulation. I wanted to keep his feet warm. Within 20 minutes, I'd find one in the toilet. I'd find one over here. He didn't want anything tight on. So it's something to think about. Easy on, easy off on the clothing as we go through this on it. There was another thing that took me a long time to figure out is that every time my dad would go in the bathroom to pee, he would call me in there. And I knew he was off on his balance and everything like that, so I'm thinking it was all a balance thing. I'm literally holding onto his belt hoop back there while he's peeing just so he wouldn't fall forward or anything. And one day he just flipped. He turned around and he goes, "What is that man doing standing there?" And I look, there's a full-length mirror right there. I could have put an X on the floor where he wanted me to stand. He wanted me to block the view of that guy over there watching him pee, which was him the whole time on it. So these are things we got to think about a little bit on it. As a caregivers, we have choices on this. You can cover the mirrors. You can remove them. I mean, doing it. My dad, I'd put him down at night. I can't tell you how many times he'd look up at me and he goes, "Dad, do I have school in the morning?" Right? So he's somewhere back in his childhood years. He wakes up in the morning, there's an 80-year-old man in that mirror in the bathroom. I couldn't get him to shave in the bathroom anymore. I don't know exactly if that's what he was still 80, so he was still getting ready for school in the morning and there's an old man there. But I don't know. But I wasn't leaving it up to the... Once I figured out it was the mirrors, I just took him out. You know, let him shave at the kitchen sink. He was happy with that. My windows are dirty. You can't see out anyway. Right? So he wasn't looking for a reflection. That was the whole point, doing it. So they get catonic about it. You got to be careful on this stuff on it. Another thing that I run into too much is somebody will come up and tell me, he goes, "None of our children will come visit because they can't handle seeing mom like this anymore." All right. Well, the problem is maybe they don't know how to visit. All right? There's something we got to learn. Questions are the root of all evils. All right? So you do not walk into that room and go, "Hey, Dad, remember me?" You just started the gears turning the wrong way. I don't care if you've been married to that person 50 years. If they're getting to that stage of the disease, you say, honey, I'm Julie. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I'm your wife, Julie. Introduce yourself all the time. Just get in the habit of it. Don't ever play the guessing game. All right? If they're standing there in a chair, nobody wants to be towered over. Sometimes they're stuck in the chair and they come on like this and they're looking down. And this is stuff that just starts building anxiety. Think of that. Make that plan. Bring the photo album with you on the visit. Make a plan. Go there with a plan and do it the right way, and you might have the best visit of your life on the deal in it. There's something I'm going to tell you. When they're gone, all these people that refuse to go, they're going to want that back. Every single one of them. Don't let that time go away and be gone, and then it's too late after that. So just because they have this dementia, and if they don't know who you are, that's okay. We all need human touch. We got to go through this. I mean, it's just part of life is going through this on it. And one day, you might have the best visit in a month. 1 month on the visit, Dale. It's like, Julie, I'm so glad you're here. Where have you been? So that's a good day. But you still have to be there. I hear it all the time. They get put into assisted livings, things like that. It goes, nursing facilities. I don't need to go anymore because they don't know who I am anymore. That is the farthest thing from the truth. First of all, your job as a caregiver is not over. It just went into a new phase. Somebody has to keep an eye on this facility. I mean, really. I mean, you just can't leave these people there like this on it. You got to go there. Every day you need to go there, or as many times as possible. I will say one of the hardest fasts that I went through with my dad was the hallucinations. Do we know the difference between a hallucination and a delusion? Anybody? It's important for caregivers that we learn this, because we need to be able to tell the doctor the correct symptoms. A delusion is a misbelief, all right? We're all going to hear a point, something like, somebody's stealing my stuff, right? That's going to come. And you're going to hear that, they get suspicious, dealing on it. But when they start turning it around, they go, I just saw this man come in my room, take my wallet and run out the door. That's an hallucination. They're as real as the ground is standing on. They can smell them, they can taste them. And what amazes me is sometimes they last for days and days and days. And I'm like, how can someone with short-term memory not know what happened 2 minutes ago, but this hallucination won't go away? I've asked multiple doctors this with hardly any good answers. I had dinner with Dr. Rosemary Laird. She co-wrote the book, Take Your Oxygen First, with Lisa Gibson, and we're having dinner. I said, listen, now what are you ever going to... She goes, consider their mind as it's stuck on a train track. They're at that part of the stage in the disease where they can't move their thought pattern. It's stuck there. It's not the perfect answer, but it explains a little bit. I went through a 30-day period where every morning my dad woke up and he thought he was on a train. And one day I said, Dad, we're in the house. Bad mistake. He goes, I can feel the train moving. He's got his hands on the table. That's how real it is to him. Doesn't it? Another day, 9 o'clock in the morning, he starts yelling. There's 5 guys at the other building. They're stealing all the tools. Now, you can't even see that building from the house. There's my bookstore in there, and that building's on the other side of the field. Right? He would not, 9 o'clock in the morning, this did not stop. This went on and on. I took him over there with his walker through the field 5 times to show him there's no one there. That last trip over there, he goes, of course they're not here. They already stole everything. He goes, I'm staying here. You go back and call the police. I'm like, we came together. We're going home together. I'm not leaving you in the field, for one, there, right? Let's go through this on it. This is as real as they can get to these people on it. We can't leave them like this. All right? We got to talk to the doctors. This is time where you got to have a good communication with the doctor, and nobody should be left like that. So just remember that. When they start hallucinating, there is medications to help the hallucinations and all that stuff on it. We've got to be careful with them, but we got to address this problem because this is bad. The hallucinations usually aren't good. We talk about routine and everything and all this stuff, redirection. Redirection doesn't work at this point. One night I put my dad down. He wasn't in bed 5 minutes. He gets up. His face is like this. I'm like, what's the matter? He goes, I can't go to bed in there. I go, why not? He goes, there's this big dog laying in bed there on my bed. I went and I changed all his bedding that day. Instead of putting the light green blanket on top, I put a big brown heavy comforter. To him, that was a dog on the bed. Let me tell you something. 6 in the morning, I'm still like, shoo, getting this invisible dog out of the house. Nobody got any sleep that night doing it. This wasn't going to stop doing it, man. So we got to address it. It's important that we address it as we go. The sleep patterns, when you start noticing they get upside down, day and night, mixed up together, This is a major sign that they're progressing. I would take that as a sign of they're progressing in the disease on it. The problem is if they're not sleeping, you're not sleeping. Right? If they're getting to this point in the disease, it's important to realize that, I hate to say adults need bedtimes, but we need to keep that routine going and try to get them down the same time of night. And then in the morning, right, 6:30 every morning I used to get up. First thing I do is stick my head in my dad's room and look to see if he was still sleeping. Fine, sleeping, that's good. I'd make a pot of coffee, that's when I do most of my writing. Every half an hour or so I'd go, I'd poke my head in there, still sleeping. But if he wasn't up by 8:30, 9 o'clock, I got him up. You're going to let them sleep to 10, 11, 12 o'clock noontime, you're going to pay for that. All right? They're going to be up at midnight doing it. And what are they doing when they're up? It's not going to be anything good. Trust me on this. That's when the mischief happens. They're wandering, stuff like that. So we want to try to get them up at the same time and try to lay them down the same time at night on it. I mean, you do it politely. You know, they are adults. It's not going to happen every night. But we want to keep them in a pattern like that when it gets to that point on it. Doing it. I will say after my dad died, our night I laid down, 10 o'clock. I woke up, it was 7 the next morning. I'm like, what the heck just happened? First night I slept through a whole night. My dad had been gone 11 months. And that was the first time I slept through a whole night. I had been living on naps for probably 7, 8 years, to be the truth of the matter, doing it. And it took that long for my body to adapt, to get back to a pattern a little bit on doing it. So your body gets, it's pretty amazing what your body and the adrenaline and everything can do on this on it. But something we got to do on this. We got to think about that. There's a lot of after effects on caregiving that we need to understand. Depression is huge. Average caregiver, 2.5 years on it. So I want you guys to do something. If you know of a person here in any of your groups and their loved one just dies, call them up. All right? You're going to say, hey, you doing okay? They're all going to say, yes, I'm fine. They're lying. Go over there, pick them up, get them out to lunch. They need a jump start back in their social life. And sometimes you just can't do it on your own. And my dad, all the time before my dad passed, he goes, when he's gone, I'm going to take a vacation. I'm going to go see old friends. I didn't want to leave the driveway. For months and months and months, I didn't want to leave the driveway. I could go to the store. I didn't want to go to the store. It's all part of your, you know, you do this for a decade or whatever. Sometimes it only takes a year and you get set into these patterns. So just give the person a call. Don't take no for an answer. Get them out of the house. Get them a little kickstart back into life here on it. So. Who's pulled the driver's license? We need to talk about that for a minute. We get into that point where you got to tell them they can't drive anymore. It usually doesn't go well. All of a sudden, my dad had 101 places to go every day. I'm like, you didn't want to go anywhere for 3 weeks. Now it's a non-stop deal. They're going to make you pay on it. Today, we got a whole different world compared to when I went through this on it. Here in Florida, we're lucky to the point where you can they have go onto the motor vehicle department, myflorida.com. Go to the motor vehicle department, they have what they call a medical reporting form. You stay anonymous. That's the key to this, really. I told my dad, I go, well, your doctor called the state and the state took your license. Never thinking that every time I took my dad to that doctor for a year and a half, he goes, you! You need to give me my license back. The doctor's looking at me, I'm like, ha, better you than me, man. You know? You keep your name out of it as you can on it. So you write down their plate number or you get their license address, everything. They say 10 days they're going to get an invitation to an on-road driving test. I can tell you, I've only had one person tell me they passed it. You know, so then it goes. They're still going to argue. They're going to give it up. 5 years my dad hadn't driven. Right? I got 2 recliners in my living room. We're watching TV there. He looked at me and he goes, Dad, you need to call the governor and get my license back. And I'm like, man, you're going to the top on this one. You thought this one out a little bit, man. I thought it was over, man. I'm doing it, so. A lot of stuff here. Holidays is a little bit early, but you know the one part of caregiving that everybody needs to realize is that there's a lot of sacrifices involved, right? For the caregiver, we have to make sacrifices. It's all part of the deal. And everybody keeps saying, oh, "This could be our last Christmas." We wanted to have a big. You don't want to turn the house around. We talked about routine and all this stuff. Just the fact that you move a bunch of furniture to put a tree up could throw these people for a ride. Now you put blinking lights on, you got things in the window and everything. All this stuff, all this tinsel, it could be very distracting, building anxiety for these people. So we might need to tone things down. Just something to think about. Even if it's like Thanksgiving, and you got a whole family coming over the house for dinner. You might want to say, you know, let's do this a little different this year. Why don't you guys come between 11 and 12, and you don't want 20 people in the house at the same time with 20 different voices going on. For an example, say if you go into a restaurant, me and you can sit in a booth and have a perfect conversation, back and forth. You're wondering why the person with dementia is getting confused and some behaviors are coming. You don't realize, first of all, you walk in there, we said, question's the root of all evils. What happens when you go to a restaurant? First thing out of their mouth, table or booth, water or tea. What kind of dressing do you want? It's nothing but questions in there, and they start off doing it. Well, we're not realizing they could be sitting in that booth, and they could be hearing every conversation in that room. When me and you block it off, we're in here having a perfect conversation on it. It might not be the same for them. So we got to think about this. So when you think about you bring a Thanksgiving dinner and you got all these people in the house, this is a lot for them. So set up a little pattern, maybe set up a schedule or something like that on it. We have to make sacrifices as we go through this on it. All right, now we're going to talk about this here. Wristband program. Throughout the time that I took care of my dad, I went through 3 stays. I had to take him into the hospital. And they were nightmares. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? I'm thinking maybe it's just one hospital. Right? It's all over the world, to be the truth of the matter. One morning, it's about 1:30 in the morning, and my dad wanted out the front door. I mean, he literally wanted out. I had to stand in front of the door. He's in his boxers, and he was going out. I'd stand, I put my hand on his shoulder, like, Dad, you can't go out this time of night. I was like, holy smokes, this man was on fire. He had 104 fever. Right, I'm like, all right, shit. Get him in the car, get him to the emergency room. I'm telling the doctor in the emergency room, I go, listen, this man's in the latter stages of Alzheimer's. There's a lot of confusion going on now. He's like, yeah, we got it. Don't worry about it. What wasted words, really. So he's checking him for his lucidity. He's going, you got to remember, my dad's at Alzheimer's and 104 fever. So how much confusion do you think was in this man? He was a mess doing it, right? He goes, do you know where you were born? My dad wouldn't answer a question. He's got his arms closed like this doing it. He goes, do you know how old you are? Won't say anything. He goes, you know who the president is? My dad wouldn't say anything. Doctor goes out, he closes the curtain. My dad looks over at me and he goes, this guy's a doctor and he doesn't even know who the president is? I mean, the point is, he didn't even know why they were asking him the questions. All right? So we can live with, where were you born? And the guy goes, Houston. Never been to Houston in their life. Because they're writing down anything this person says. All right? That we can almost get away with. But when they start asking, when's the last time you've had surgery? Are you allergic to any medications? You know, how many kidneys do you have? Doing it. And they're writing down anything. We got a real problem here as we go through this on it. I got a woman over on the East Coast. All right? She brings her husband in the hospital. You got to remember that they're not in the hospital for dementia. Something else is bringing them in there. Let me back up 1 minute. I want to tell you why my dad was in the hospital, because this is important. When he had the 104 fever the first time I brought him in there, come to find out the man was impacted for almost 40 days. I didn't think he was going to live through this. Right? They couldn't do surgery. They couldn't even do a lower GI on him. They didn't think he was going to live through the surgery. When they went towards the end of this disease, and they started dying of, a lot of times it's organ failure, which is what my dad on his death certificate was doing it. And we need to remember that the colon is one of the first organs that starts getting sluggish. All right? We have to keep an eye on their bowel movements. According to my dad, he goes, no, I went 2 days ago. I'm fine. The man was, you should have seen what they were pulling out of him. Looked like spinach. It was nothing but poison inside of him. It was bad. Dealing it. So that's something I don't care if you put it on the calendar, you put a B every time they have a bowel movement, pay attention to it. It killed John Wayne. Everybody thinks John Wayne died of lung cancer. He actually died of being impacted. So if you can kill the Duke, just think of what it can do to your little loved one there sometimes on it. So let's go through this on it. So anyway, this woman over in the East Coast, she brings her husband into the hospital. Right? He's there. He's not there for Alzheimer's and it's dementia dealing it. He's there for something else. So she finally gets a chance to go home, shower, change. She gets back to the hospital, and he's not in the bed. You're like, well, where's my husband? He goes, well, he's in surgery. Right? He's an adult. He signed himself into surgery. They never called her dealing it. Next morning, she comes back. She goes in the morning. He goes to her. He goes, you need to get me out of here. They're trying to kill me in here. I hurt. She goes to the nurse's station. She goes, you got to give my husband something for pain. More for pain. She goes, we haven't given him anything. He refused all pain meds. They did exploratory surgery on this man. They cut him right down the gut. And when the anesthesia wore off, he refused. They gave him nothing. He was in shock. This is happening all over the place, I'm telling you. Dealing it. Yes, they are adult, but they're adult with dementia. Do we know the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? Okay. Alzheimer's is a disease. All right? It creates dementia. The word dementia is actually an umbrella term for multiple symptoms. You know, cognitive impairment, behavior, poor decision making. That's what the hospital needs to understand. This person he shouldn't be making these decisions at this point on it, right? Yes, he is an adult, but he has an adult with dementia dealing in it, so we go through this on it. So the word dementia, there's a Dr. Burns from Boston University, he just wrote a paper a year or so ago on it. Consider the word dementia like the word flu. If you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you have the flu, all he's really saying is that you have flu-like symptoms. He's not telling you what virus is creating the flu. Same thing with dementia. If you got Parkinson's disease dementia, PDD, it's the Parkinson causing the dementia. If it's Alzheimer's, it's the Alzheimer's causing the dementia. If it's frontal lobe degeneration and you got FTD with the dementia, it's the FTD causing the dementia. So the dementia is the symptoms that is being created by the disease. If somebody actually says, I was diagnosed with dementia, that's not even a true statement. The statement should be, I was diagnosed with dementia-like symptoms, is what it should be as we go on it. So just so you understand that dementia is not a disease. It's a multiple thing of symptoms as we go through this on it. All right, so I started banging on doors. I'm like, this is crazy. I went through all these stages with my dad in the hospital. None of them are any better, right? They'd taken anything this man says. I go outside, I go, listen, I'm going to go get some fresh air, all right? I just want you to know, I have to explain to every nurse because you come back the next day, the nurse that did a good job, she's on the other wing now. They rotate them through the system and they go through this on it. I said, listen, I want you to know that my dad's dementia. She goes, oh no, we got it. I go downstairs for 10 minutes, get some air, I come back up. This nurse is standing over my dad with a clipboard, drilling him for his prescription history. This man couldn't tell if he took a pill 2 minutes ago. Right? My dad looks at me, he sees my eyes, he goes, if you don't, I'm not going to say what he says, but he goes, if you don't get this woman out of here, there's a little other words mixed in there about dealing it. He goes, I'm going to have her arrested. This is my building. I own it. And I'm like, this is bad. There's a guy in the bed next to him. He had the window side. Right? They closed the curtain. Every time the family would come and visit, he's flipping out. He's like, all he hears all these voices on the other side of the curtain. He goes, somebody needs to go shut that door. Right? There is no door over there. He's in the bed, the window over there, and on it. It's like he just wouldn't stop. You couldn't convince him he was in the hospital. It was bad. He was at his worst of his worst. Yeah, he's sick. He's got dementia. He doesn't understand where he's at. Beeping equipment and everything on it. You know, finally the guy begged to be moved. They're wheeling him out of there. He looks at me and he goes, how do you do this? I'm like, what took you so long? I would have been asked to be moved right away. I'm going to get that bed over there, man. Dealing it goes through on. We need to educate the people. That's what it's boiling down to. The program that I started with the wristband, all right, this symbol here, if I get it, actually I don't even have it with me on it. The purple angel symbol, it's all on your flyer there on it. That is a universal symbol for all dementias. It started in the UK, all right? It could be post-surgery delirium, and they're using it. Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, doesn't matter what it is on it, you know. But the symbol that we're using, that we're putting on the wristband, everybody's like, how do you get away with the HIPAA laws on this? The question to that, the answer to that, is that this is not a diagnosis. This is only a symbol that stands for at risk. All we're saying is that this patient is at risk for cognitive impairment. That's all we're saying on this, on it. But the thing is, we need to have a visual contact on that. One nurse might know up here, next thing you know, the guys downstairs in radiology, they don't have a clue. They're asking them all these questions all over again and everything. So we're going to the hospital and we're training. The Alzheimer's Association has partnered in with me on this. We've been going to the hospital, we're training. What are we teaching them? First thing we're teaching them is that you have to verify all medical history of anybody wearing this on their wrist. You cannot take their word for this. If it means going to your desk, making a phone call, calling the family or whatever it is on it, I mean, this is something we got to do. We can't take their word for this. So we're getting that point across as we go through this on it. We're teaching them many things. We're teaching them in-time communication. All right? You don't tell Mr. Jones on Wednesday that on Friday he's going to radiology for testing, because between Wednesday and Friday, Mr. Jones is like, I think I'm supposed to be somewhere, right? And the anxiety is building for 2-3 days. You use in-time communication and you go, Mr. Jones, we. All right? What we're teaching them is that you take that pronoun of you throw it out the window and you substitute it for we all the time. Mr. Jones, we are going downstairs to radiology in about 15 minutes. I'm going to come back and get you. You know, you got to have everything as a team. It's got to be in-time communication. These things may sound simple, but I'm telling you, we're keeping the patients calm by doing this. What I want you people to do right now, because you don't have this in this part of the state, when you bring your loved one into the emergency room, you do not let them separate you. Because that's the first thing they're going to do. They're going to take your loved one into triage, and they're going to make you stay at the admissions desk and fill out all the paperwork. You say, either the paperwork comes with me, or I'll do it when we get out of triage, because that's when all the important questions are starting. I had a neurologist tell me over at Brookville Hospital, he goes, all the questions happen in the ER. I'm like, what hospital do you work in? Because there's nothing in that building that's not a question. How are you feeling? What do you want for lunch? Where does it hurt? I mean, there's nothing. We talked about questions being the root of all evils. Nothing but questions in the hospital. All right, we're teaching them introduction. I don't care the CNA. I tell them at the training, I go, pretend you just blew your breath on the mirror and watch that thing vaporize, your breath vaporize. That's how fast your last introduction could have left that person. So you come in there and go, hi, I'm your CNA. My name's Julie. I'm your CNA today. Every time you walk in the room, as we go through this on it. Important stuff as we go through all this on it. Redirection. Brooksville Regional, is now a Bayfront Hospital, went out and bought activity pillows for all the patients. Their biggest concern, we trained 200 employees in that hospital. All right. Now, part of this program is that a family member is going to be allowed to have a house sitter, a hospital sitter, stay with their loved one while they need to go home and wash and change or something like that. Give them a little bit of respite. I'm telling you, people, you cannot abuse this, because that person doing the babysitting, you call it what you want, sitter, they don't know the answers that need to be answered. If all these questions are coming in while you're gone, so you need to be there as much as possible. Yes, go home and take a break, get yourself together, but while they're there, we have to be there with them as much as possible as we go through all this on it. But all the figures that they figured was going to cost them more money, we did a 6-month pilot program, they all went down. The patients, they didn't want to use the medications, all the behavior situations went down. Everything they thought was going to be going, it cost them more money, ended up costing the hospital less, because they learned how the behaviors. What are we teaching them? We're teaching behaviors and communications. Those are the two main things we're teaching as we go in there on it. It's important stuff. The other thing we're teaching about hallucinations. So people that understand the hospitals, I asked 200 people that I trained, does anybody here know what Lewy body dementia is? Now, these are hospital employees. One person raised their hand. It's unacceptable. You know. Do we know what Lewy bodies is? Anybody? Lewy bodies is a different type of dementia. The Lewy body is actually a protein deposit in the brain. The problem with the Lewy bodies, for one, they're usually younger, sometimes in their 50s, doing it. We talked about hallucinations with the Alzheimer's, usually in the latter stages. With the Lewy bodies, they come early, sometimes 2 years into the disease. And they're very severe. The hallucinations, they have what they call night terrors, where they start acting out their dreams. They're kicking and screaming in their sleep. Things get bad on it. We just found out, I was just doing an event at Gulf Coast University, they're saying that these night terrors that are associated with the Lewy body dementia actually start 10, 15 years before the dementia even starts showing up on it. So if you have a loved one that's kicking and screaming and acting out their dreams, and they get dementia, make sure the doctor knows about this. Because that's a good sign that it might not be Alzheimer's, it could be Lewy body dementia. What happens with people that are diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it's not, it's Lewy bodies, when the hallucinations start up, they start giving the person anescopic drugs for the hallucinations. With the Lewy bodies, they backfire. They actually make the hallucinations worse and the behaviors worse. And that's when most diagnosis gets turned around. Dealing it. So we're getting better at diagnosing different dementias, but we got a ways to go on it. Well, my other biggest concern is the Baker acting that's happening. We know what Baker acting is? It's a state term for a 72-hour psych evaluation. No family visit, no nothing. Basically, they get psyched. So what's happening, Baker acting in this state is becoming a babysitting tool. The police find somebody wandering. 8 out of 10 times, the police are telling me, that guy has they have no ID on him. We don't even know who they are. Now, they're waiting for a phone call for somebody to say there's somebody missing. Meanwhile, the caregiver's getting the best sleep they've had in probably a month. It's nice and quiet in the house. Doing it. So what happens, the police don't know what to do with this person, they Baker act them. The person goes to a psych hospital. What happens in a psych hospital? They basically just get medically restrained with drugs. It's bad news doing it on it. In the hospitals, they don't know, they get combative, they call Lewy body something, they don't know how to deal with the behaviors. The hospitals are Baker acting to people. So when I started this program, I was talking to the CON of nursing over there, so I'm like, we got to do something about the breakdown. And she's like, yeah. We did a 6-month pilot program. The very next day we met. The first thing out of her mouth, she goes, oh my goodness, we have to do something about the Baker acting. I'm like, listen to you. She goes, they're coming to me Baker acting, all they got is a UTI out of his facility. All they needed was antibiotics, and now they're ending up in a psych hospital. All right? What happens when they get wandering? This is the part that the hospitals and the police don't even see. They get Baker acted for wandering. right? Because they don't know what to do with these people on it. Say it's the second time they get caught wandering, they get baker acted, a judge steps in and says, okay, you can't control this person, we're appointing a legal guardian, and all the rights are taken away from that family. I got a friend of mine who lives in Atlanta. She brings her husband into the emergency room. He sprains his foot. He's there for a foot. He's got FTD, which is one part of FTD is poor social skills sometimes. Doing it. So she's telling the ER doctor, she goes, listen, I just want you to know my husband's got FTD. He goes, doctor's like, I've seen this before. That man's bipolar. Right? Bad term. I hate that term, doing it. She's like, no, I'm telling you, I've had 2 neurologists. He's been diagnosed with FTD. They're arguing. The husband's had enough. He hops over there with his bad foot, takes that doctor and throws him up against the wall. Now, this guy's thrown on the floor, handcuffed. He's been Baker acted. State sipped in, the court sipped in, took him away. That man has, to this day, has never been home. That was 3 years ago. She lost complete control of her husband over a foot. So we got to be careful on this stuff. I told you about the guy wanted to go in front of a judge to make his wife take the medication. You do not want to do that. If the judge thinks that you're not taking care of this person or you can't handle it, he's going to find somebody that will. And it's going to be somebody you don't even know. They're going to appoint a legal guardian. We got to be very careful with that. And the people that are getting Baker acting, this is happening too much on doing it. Unfortunately, Baker acting is for suicides. It's for people that are going to hurt themselves. It was never, ever meant for dementia, and it's been used for dementia way too much right now. So, the biggest part about the wristband program, I just want to make one thing clear, it's the education. We have to go in there and educate the staff of that hospital. In the state of Florida, and almost every state I've been to on it, you know how much training they need for dementia in a hospital? You know what's required by the state? 0. Absolutely 0. Right? It's bad enough with the home care agency. Friday, I'm going up to Bayshore Care in St. Petersburg. I'm training the staff from the home care agency. You know what the state requirements are for home care agencies? A couple of written paragraphs on dementia. That's all the people need to do home care, to come to your house and take care of somebody with dementia. It's just, to talk about below standard, it's a joke on it. So we do have some companies, some facilities that are going up and beyond and actually getting extra training that's beyond the state. Most of these things are like, we're only doing what we're required and leaving it at that. So we go through this on it. Who's got power of attorney? Okay, I want to make one thing, we all need power of attorney in this thing on it. Very important that we go when we talk to an elder law attorney. And it really needs to be an elder law attorney because they specialize in this. But what I want you to do, if it's early, all right, and you haven't got the power of attorney yet and they're still early in the disease, go to their doctor first. Ask their doctor to write a letter of competency for this person and have it dated that day. Then take that letter, then go to the elder law attorney and give that a piece of paper saying that they're competent at this point, at this time and day in their life, that they're competent, and then have the power of attorneys run. Because I'm going to tell you, in the end, all the vultures come out. Family's going to get together, they're going to say, hey, you should have never been power of attorney. He wasn't competent when he made you power of attorney. I should be power of attorney. You're going to say, well, I got a letter from the doctor saying he was competent. That letter is going to be worth its weight more than anything on this. And trust me when I say the vultures come out on this. The biggest complaint I get, no matter, I speak all over the country on this. No matter where I'm at, the number one complaint I get is that I'm the only one in the family doing anything, nobody else is helping me. Number one complaint I get. The truth of the matter is all those ones that are very quiet, that are not helping, they're going to be the loudest in the end. They're the ones that are going to be screaming like, hey, wait a minute, where's the will? I mean, it's all coming up in the end dealing it. So protect yourself. When you go to that power of attorney, I don't want you to say, yeah, we need to make a plan for him, for my loved one. You say, we need to make a plan for us. Make sure you're protected too. Don't just think about that. I know it's all the time you're thinking about them, but you say, I want to be protected as the caregiver, and I want them to be protected for everything they have too. Make the plan for two people when you're there. Right? And we all seem to forget that, man, but something we've got to do. If you've got a joint checking account with this person, right? Even if you're a spouse, you got to make sure, and you have to call the bank to do this because it's not on the check and it's not on your statement. You want to make sure that your account, that you have the right of survivorship on it. There used to be in the old days, it would say top name and or. You notice that middle part was taken away? The banks want that money stuck in escrow and probate. So make sure that you have the right of survivorship. Because if you don't, if it's just a joint account and it's top name and you don't have the right, when the top person dies, you don't have access to that account until it's through probate. And I'm going to tell you, you can make all the funeral plans you want and all the arrangements. There's always something that pops up in the end that you need to be prepared for. You might need that money. So you got to protect yourself too as the caregiver and everything on it. So important stuff. Who goes to a support group? Raise your hands high so I can see.
What's the question?
How many people here are going to a support group? Okay. Shame on everyone who is not raising their hand. If you didn't raise your hand, you're making a mistake. At the very beginning, I started saying, you got to learn to get help. I'm telling you, that is the place to go. The very first support group I ever went to, and you got to remind me, when I started this, there was one in my county, in Hernando County, once a month. That was the only support group there. Now they're everywhere. There aren't at different times of day. It's a different world now. But I go to the support group, I sit down, and there's two people sitting across the table from me, and their loved ones had been gone 3 years, 2 to 3 years, and they're still going to the meetings. They were the ones that had all the answers for me. The doctors don't have them. I'm telling you, the people that are living through this now, or have already gone all the way through it, are the people you need to talk to as you go through this on it. So, all right. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the new website that we got on this. We just started in June 1st as a site called DementiaMentors.com, okay? And the concept about this is that when somebody gets diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, whatever it is, the standard of what happens today is the doctor's like, okay, you probably got Alzheimer's disease. Here's your Exelon patch. I'll see you in 6 months. And they send these people out of the door. No information, no nothing. What do you think's happening to these people? I've talked to multiple people living with the disease. They all tell me the same thing. Most thing I hear is like, well, I cried for 6 weeks. Depression's right then and there. This is what we want to do. We want to put them on the right track right from the beginning on the deal. They go home, they Google. What do they see? All they see is the end stage of the disease and all the bad symptoms. They're not seeing the good part of life there is. You can live with dementia very well for a long time if you do things right. We've learned stuff now that we didn't know before on it. I got to tell you something. In 17 years, the last 8 months, I've worked with people living with dementia from all over the world on this site. I learned more in 8 months than I learned in 17 years from these people. Totally turned my whole thought around, pattern deal in it. Some of these people are living very well with dementia. There's one thing that they have in common. They're staying social. Some of these guys are advocates. They're out speaking on the disease and everything. The more they're doing it, I got a friend from England. He goes, when I get up in the morning, he goes, I don't put my slippers on. I put on my boots. Right? What he means by that, he goes, he ain't giving up and going and dealing with it. This is the attitude we got to get. So with Dementia Mentors, privately, all you need is a webcam on your computer. You fill out a request. We're going to set you up with a person. If you got Lewy body dementia, we are going to set you up with a mentor that has Lewy body dementia. You're going to be able to talk to somebody that has that disease one-on-one. Ask anything you want. You're not going to get that at the doctors. You're not going to get this anywhere. We're the first people to do this. And I'm going through this on it. Dave helped me out yesterday. I notified Dave we had a woman. She was breaking down. She was a mess. Dave had about an hour and a half session with her privately. That woman called me and thanked me and thanked me and thanked me after that. She got to talk to somebody. I mean, we're matching the symptoms. That's the most important. If you've got front temporal lobe dementia, we're setting you up with FTD. We had a woman that has FTD PPA, primary progressive aphasia, where she can barely speak. She's mentoring people with FTD PPA. I mean, and people that have a hard time to speak, they're embarrassed to talk to somebody. She can talk to somebody where they're both having a hard time talking, but it's okay to them. This is huge, what we're doing on this. We're doing what we call virtual memory cafes. There's people over here have a memory cafe? The idea of a memory cafe, this is only for people with dementia. It's a gathering time. This is a social time. But we took it a step further. We're doing it right out of their living rooms. All they need is a webcam. Right? We're doing 3 a week. Yesterday was the first day. We just started one that was UK-based in England doing it. It was 9 o'clock in the morning in England, 10 o'clock in Germany, 10 o'clock South Africa, 3 o'clock in Indonesia, 6 o'clock in Australia. We had people from all over the world, only with dementia, sitting there talking. We were going to put a time period on these things. We were going to last about an hour. We found out we can't. Nobody wants to say goodbye. Sometimes they last 3 hours, these sessions. We got one on Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern time. It's 4 o'clock in England at that time. We got another one on Friday. It starts at 1 o'clock Eastern time. It's 6 o'clock in England. So we're working out. We had to do different because we got different time zones. I've learned a lot about time zones lately, let me tell you, man. Some of these countries are not even on the hour. Some parts of Indonesia, it's 11 hours and 15 minutes. I mean, it's different stuff on it. But we're getting these people, some of these people in the country. We had a guy yesterday from Indonesia. He goes, there is nothing for me in this part of the world. You can't believe how good this was for him. He goes, I can't wait till next Monday. So if you got your loved one, and you'll sit there, all you got to do is set up the computer for them. If they can't do it themselves, click them on a webcam and let them sit there. If they want to just sit back and listen, that's fine. But I guarantee you, they're going to get into the conversation once it gets going. Dealing it. And they're talking about symptoms. They want to talk about a movie, that's fine. It doesn't matter. And there's no judgment. Very good for these people on dealing it. So there's a page of videos on this site. I want you to go on DementiaMentors.com and go to the video page. We already loaded 6. These are like 3-minute videos. They're around 3 minutes long or shorter or longer, but they average around 3 minutes. They're all done by people living with dementia from all over the world. Right? They're talking about all their different symptoms that you can learn more from that one page. The first week we launched the site, we had 5,722 views on the videos. I was like, holy smokes. I was a little shocked in that one deal. We did almost 11,000 views on the video the first month. Every week I put 5 new videos up. We keep rotating. We put new videos on the deal. Like I said, it's about all different stuff about dementia, hearing it from the person who's living it. You're not going to get an education like this anywhere else. Well, Dave's been in some of the video, the miniature cafes. Pretty good, isn't it? Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. When they get done. Another thing about the mentoring, I want to make clear. This is a two-way street. The person that's doing the mentor is getting helped as much as the mentee. When they're done doing that session, the person that's the mentor that has the disease too, their feet aren't even touching the ground. They feel so good and useful. We just gave purpose to all these people. And they're like, I just helped somebody and I still have dementia. It's a two-way street on this. It's helping out the mentors and the mentees on it. You got to go to the site and check it out. The one flyer that I gave you has the address on it, at the top on it, and everything on it. So I'm telling you, don't let your loved ones miss up on this opportunity. Set them up on the computer. We'll talk to them. We're here to help. The mentors are meant to help people that are newly diagnosed, but we're still helping people that are in the moderate, early stages too. It doesn't have to be on it. But our goal is to help the people right from the beginning as much as possible. Yeah.
Tiffany just mentioned that it helps the caregiver also. He gets a break and gets to do other things.
Yeah. My buddy Harry, the whole time during the cafe, his wife goes out. She doesn't have to worry about it. She's got 2 hours to go out and do her stuff while he's on the computer with that group on the deal in it. So I mean, she's absolutely right on that. So, and the person, I'm telling you, it is something that we should have done a long time ago. But now we get different technology. And what's good about the site that we're using, it's just a link. It's no password, no nothing. All you got to do, we're going to email you a link on it. You click on that link and bang, you're in the group. You're in their video, mic, talking live, one-on-one. Or with the cafes, or with 10 of them or 12 of them at a time. As many as it is on it. So we're trying to keep the groups under a dozen. You know, it gets a little more complicated, more people in there. So eventually, my buddy Harry, who's helped me build this thing on it, he goes, one day we're going to have a virtual memory cafe that doesn't stop. What he means by that, he goes, anytime that somebody wants to talk to somebody with dementia, they'll be able to click on that thing, and there's always going to be people there. And he's right about that. We're going to get to that point. So it's cool stuff. So, you guys got any questions?
Yes, question, please. There's actually been some studies that have been published within the last year that have shown that individuals who think that they're having a problem with their memory, think they may be developing dementia, okay, tend to be right. And in fact, the studies have shown that very often the individual, the patient, is the first person to recognize there is difficulty, and that we need to get doctors to listen. I'm a physician, and I had told getting doctors to listen. So I know what you're talking about, and there's a huge amount of education that needs to occur in order, for physicians and for neurologists and neuropsychologists.
We got a long way to
people that
go.
we're depending on. And so we have a long way to go. We need a lot of people handing their neurologists the the information,
Their files, their records.
no, the information of the website Dementia Mentors, of what's available out there. I had nothing available to me when I was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. My wife did a lot of online looking, which helped us out a tremendous amount. But handing the doctors the flyers, about dementiamentors.com, about DAI, about groups on Facebook that are not only closed, but are in fact secret. There are secret groups which you cannot search for on Facebook, which I belong to. Gary doesn't because he doesn't have dementia, but that are hugely helpful because people feel completely comfortable, chatting and saying what's on their mind. It's not live. I mean, it's comments. It's wonderful. So we have to make these things available to everyone.
The Dementia Mentors thing, one part when I'm talking to the hospital, the wristband, I'm saying you need to have all your neurologists, everything, look at this program here. Because even if they don't even use it, they might at least start thinking and go, hey, maybe I'm not diagnosing them right. Maybe I'm not sending them out of the office the right way. Because they're not. They're sending these people out there with nothing. And I hate to say this, but the truth of the matter is they were just handed a terminal diagnosis. And they're sent home with no information. You get diagnosed with diabetes, they send you to nutrition. You get diagnosed with dementia, they don't send you anywhere. And that's what we got to try to fix a little bit on that. So, on it. Yes?
Does, if you don't treat somebody right away that shows signs of dementia, does that make the disease more aggressive, or does it progress faster?
So it's only a one-way street on this. If one thing we got to tell people that think, oh, it's just something. First of all, dementia is not a normal part of aging. We have to just forget that. All right? If you have dementia, there is something in your body causing it. My mother's 95. She just turned 95 in March. She's sharp as a whip. A little too smart sometimes, I got to say. A little conniving on the deal in it. That's the way life's supposed to be. So if you got dementia, a lot of people don't want to go because they're afraid it's Alzheimer's. But the truth of the matter is, it could be a lack of vitamin B. It could be a thyroid problem. There could be other things that could be fixed right away. That's why it's important to go to the doctor and be honest on it. I don't know if that was answering what you wanted on it, but I mean, you can't play around with it. I mean, it could be something simple. Vascular dementia is one of these dementias that's actually reversible a little bit if you can get it early enough. Once you let the damage happen, it's not reversible. So we need to get them. We've got to talk these people into going to the doctor. They got to be honest about it. That's why the more we talk about dementia, the more we break down the stigmas, the better things are going to be. We're heading in the right direction. We're just a little slow in getting there. So, yes.
Cafe thing?
When you go on to the Dementia Mentors, you're going to see the top banner. It's going to have all different pages. You'll see the virtual memory cafe. Just click on that, and at the bottom there's a sign-up form, a little thing on it. So we'll send you the link. We'll add you to the group on it. We're doing 3 a week right now, like I said, different times. You really want to get your loved one involved in this.
Would you repeat that question, Gary?
She wanted to know, how do we get to the virtual memory cafes that we're talking about? If you go to Dementia Mentors, on the top of the banner on the website, you'll see there's a resource page, there's a video page. Click on the virtual memory cafe page, and it'll bring you onto the page. It'll explain to you, and there's a little sign-in sheet at the bottom, a little thing form you got to fill out on it. And we'll email you the links and everything. We'll get you set up. I'll take care of you if you sign up on it. So there's also a resource page on that site that is for people living with dementia. They're not a resource page for caregivers. These are for people with dementia on it. It's websites, blogs by people living with dementia. The one thing I learned about working on the wristband program for so long is that bottom line is now there's almost everything out there for the caregivers. There's nothing out there for the people living with this disease. And that's what we got to change now. That's a different aspect on everything on it. So
Gary, mild cognitive impairment is a good enough diagnosis to get on the website?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So much, Gary.
Thank you for coming.